video, we will share examples of possible physical, digital, and psychological risks, along with measures to mitigate or reduce them. We will discuss how to apply the problem-solution approach when discussing our safety and security, and how to ultimately develop a good implementation plan of safety and security measures. It is important to note that while it is essential for individuals to take personal measures, the organization plays a critical role in providing and fostering a safe and secure environment for their team members. Therefore, we should always aim to balance the measures from the angle of the organization's responsibility and not rely solely on individuals' own protective measures. Also, keep in mind that the list of risks and measures presented here is not exhaustive. We're just using these examples to explore the framework for developing and implementing security measures. Let's go back to the scenario we introduced in Module 1. Do you recall it? A newly established human rights organization called the Balronia Center for Human Rights is undertaking a risk management process for the first time in an attempt to better protect its work, beneficiaries, and staff members. The Balronia Center for Human Rights extensively works on human rights monitoring with the aim to unveil human rights violations and abuses. For this purpose, it keeps comprehensive online databases with information containing personal data and documentation on ongoing investigations into human rights violations. Due to their work on sensitive topics, the organization is sometimes exposed to online and offline intimidation, smear campaigns, as well as physical attacks. The Balronian Center for Human Rights works in and with areas where human rights defenders are frequently targeted for their work and regularly participates in and monitors peaceful assemblies, which at times can turn violent. It has 5 staff members, and some trusted volunteers offer ad hoc support to certain activities. Due to the limited capacity and resources available, staff members are often overworked. Based on this scenario, we assess the probability and impact of different risks that might occur, as well as discuss some potential risk treatments. Now, with the help of our 2 experts, we're going to explore these potential risks a bit further and discuss possible solutions to effectively address them.
First, we will consider possible security measures that could be undertaken in relation to the following risk. A threat actor gets access to our email accounts and chats in messaging apps. What measures could help mitigate or reduce this risk in your opinion? Feel free to pause the video for a moment and try to come up with some. In this case, typical mitigating measures could be recognizing phishing, using a strong password to access accounts, using two-factor authentication, 2FA. The idea behind 2FA is that if someone has our password, they still cannot access our account, as a second factor of authentication is required. Setting up recovery options. This include, for example, secret questions, recovery email address, and phone numbers, etc. Exploring access control on Google Drive or Facebook page, etc. An organization has to decide who should have access to what, how to provide the access, how to revoke the access. Controlling third-party apps and services that have access to our accounts. For example, with services related to our Google spreadsheets, we often give them access without realizing they are not Google services, but they are developed by third parties. You should think twice before granting such access and make sure you can really trust the service provider. Controlling third-party extensions in web browsers. People often don't realize that these extensions might have access to the content of all the websites we visit in our browser. Emails, documents, messages, everything. Enabling disappearing messages if needed. If someone gets access to the account or device of a staff member, they will only be able to access recent messages. Protecting the devices from which staff members are logging in. Let's consider the following. A threat actor confiscates our devices, computers, smartphone, etc. What measures could help mitigate this risk in your opinion? Again, you can pause the video and try to think of some examples. Typical mitigating measures in this case would all be aimed at making it harder for a threat actor to access data on devices. Measures might include implementing full disk encryption. The adversary will not be able to get access to the data on encrypted and locked devices, laptops, smartphone, etc. Protecting devices with a strong password. All our devices should be password protected. Setting up a lock or auto-lock on devices for when they are not in use. Considering enabling biometric logins. This might be secure or not based on the circumstances. Not using a device if it was seized and returned. Get rid of it. There might be malware installed or a physical spying device planted in it, which might be impossible to detect if we have limited resources.
Let's take a look at the risk staff members are physically injured during their assembly monitoring mission. When discussing the risk of physical injuries in the Module 1, we evaluated that sending people to areas that are risky for human rights defenders is too dangerous and decided not to send them as the best measure. However, avoiding risks entirely is not always possible. Let's have another look. What else could we do to reduce or mitigate the risk of staff members getting physically injured? Maybe provide staff training on how to safely conduct monitoring of freedom of peaceful assembly. Provide first aid training and equip monitors with on-site first aid kits. Conduct a risk assessment before the mission so that it's possible to identify potential risks in advance. According to the risk assessment, provide protection equipment and means as needed, such as glasses, gloves, respirators, and helmets. Develop a security plan with clear protocols, including evacuation routes. Assign a person responsible within the organization for regular connections and check-ins with the monitoring team. Provide access to mental health professionals to support monitors and help them cope with trauma following incidents. As you can see in this example, when thinking of mitigating measures, we considered that a physical risk can influence not only our physical health, but also our emotional state. It is always important to take a holistic approach to security. When talking about stress-related risks, we may first think of psychological security. However, we should consider that stress impacts our behavior and attention, so it can also compromise our physical and digital security. For example, it may reduce our focus, making tasks like managing online security more challenging. Let's move on to another risk. Because of the limited capacity and resources available to do their work, staff members start showing symptoms of acute or chronic stress. So, what measures could help mitigate this risk, in your opinion? Feel free to pause the video for a moment and try to come up with some. Maybe here we could provide training on stress management so that staff members can better counter signs of stress. Encourage work-life balance by promoting regular breaks. Have leave policies in place to promote the use of vacation days and alleviate stress and workload by encouraging appropriate breaks. Implement an internal system of distributing tasks that aims to balance workload, ensuring no one is overwhelmed. For example, during busy periods, a colleague can share some of their tasks with another team member who is able and willing to help. Any such system should be developed with input from staff to ensure fairness and collaboration. Organize team building and relaxation activities to foster collaboration and reduce stress, like outdoor sports, yoga classes, or access to gym or a swimming pool. Make a list of and mobilize resources to provide access to recommended mental health support professionals, such as therapists or counselors. The stressful nature of the work of human rights defenders often contributes to the development of unhealthy habits. Let's take a look at this type of risk. A staff member develops unhealthy habits as a way to deal with work-related stress. Similar to the previous scenario, we could mitigate stress factors and workload by providing access to professional counseling or mental health support, providing resources on work-life balance, healthy habits and overall well-being, acting proactively and promoting healthy practices in the workplace to prevent stress-related health issues and the spread of disease. For example, encourage regular health checkups or contribute to staff well-being by offering nutritious office snacks and encouraging proper lunch breaks away from desks. Ensuring medical insurance for the staff. It is important to recall that excessive alcohol or drug consumption, as well as eating disorders, can be signs of increased stress. If you are concerned about these behaviors, immediately seek professional help from a doctor or psychologist. Have a look at our fact sheet on the topic to learn more. Let's consider this risk. A staff member shows signs of emotional burnout due to workload. In your opinion, how can we deal with the risk of emotional burnout? Feel free to pause the video for a moment and try to come up with some measures. To mitigate or reduce the risk of emotional burnout, we can provide professional counseling or mental health support, such as therapists or counselors. Allocate resources for training on stress management and well-being. Offer teleworking options to give staff greater flexibility in their schedules, helping them achieve a better work-life balance. Encourage a digital detox or technological rest. It is important to take time away from screens and devices to rest your mind. This can be provided by adjusting work schedules or installing software that limits screen time on work computers. Organize office shutdowns for all employees to go on vacation in order to avoid disturbances during vacations and holidays. Mobilize resources to hire HR professionals or at least to involve external HR consultants who could assist management in dealing with issues of workload and burnout. Encourage regular meetings where colleagues can discuss their workload and possible solutions, such as fair distribution of tasks. Now, for the purpose of the course, we will present an example of an implementation plan that could be developed based on the measures we have identified in our examples. Please, don't try to copy-paste this example or the measures we mentioned, and always apply what you learn to your own context. How would you structure an implementation plan? What kind of information would you include? This is what an implementation plan might look like based on our example of measures: person, until, date, to configure the corporate email to enforce strong passwords, 2FA, recovery options, third-party apps to document the process and create rules, policies on these configurations, and to check the configurations every 6 months. Person, until, date, to configure devices, including full disk encryption, passwords, and auto-locking, to create, update rules, policies on the configurations, and to check the configurations every 6 months. Person, until, date, to purchase first aid kits for monitoring missions and to check the stock levels every year. Person, until, date, to compile resources on work-life balance, healthy habits, and overall well-being for staff members, and to check for new resources annually. Person, until, date, to compile a list of recommended mental health professionals or counseling services and to update the list annually. Person, until, date, to organize a training on stress management and well-being and to assess the needs for another training annually. As you can see, there are several elements to take into consideration while drafting actionable measures. The responsibility. Responsibility for each task is assigned to an identified individual. It could be the same person for several or all the tasks, or it could be a different person for each task. A timeline. All tasks have a deadline attached. The timeline for implementation should match your own resources and capacities. Finally, each task has several action points, which allows to tackle a risk in depth while making measures easier to track or follow up on. Let's take another look at the examples. In the first task, we can see an example of a security perimeter, which gathers corporate accounts and devices. In such a case, the organization might decide that all the work-related data should be on corporate devices and on the corporate email systems, like email, calendar, and Drive, and never be accessed from personal devices or accounts. But how can this apply to many human rights defenders who mainly use personal devices for their work? If the organization has the capacities, they could incorporate these devices into the security perimeter by ensuring they are properly configured and regularly checked. It is therefore essential to assess the implementation capabilities of the organization and make sure that the implementation plan is tailored to their specific context. Not doing so can lead to a false sense of security. It's crucial to avoid the mistake of assuming your security has improved just because of the planning phase. Let's recap. What is needed for safety measures to be correctly implemented? People. Sometimes the human capacity we have is not enough and we need more people. For example, to configure devices and accounts, it is important to have an allocated budget. Make sure that each of the tasks in the implementation plan is discussed with the responsible person and a list of the resources needed is prepared. Adequate resources. For example, we may need to purchase certain services, hardware and software to implement digital security measures, or we may need resources to organize staff training on physical and psychological safety. A plan tailored to our needs. With a tailored plan, even when our resources are limited, we can aim to implement certain measures to the best of our ability and make sure our most important assets are protected. Blanket solutions are usually more cost-demanding than adopting proper safety measures based on specific needs. By effectively using available tools tailored to our context, we can still achieve meaningful progress. Realistic goals. It is important that we are realistic and plan for the measures that are in the organization's or our own individual capacity. For example, the time frame for implementation can vary significantly, ranging from a single day to an indefinite period. Drawing from our practical experience, a realistic average time frame falls within the range of 6 to 8 months. However, the actual duration is highly dependent on context and could be 1 week, 2 weeks, or 12 months, depending on the specific circumstances. Collaboration. Successful implementation requires a collaborative and inclusive process. Bringing in perspectives and experiences from everyone involved is motivating and crucial to ensuring each measure is carried out effectively. Thank you, and stay safe.